Hey everyone and welcome to Inside Gaming. Recently, friend of the show Jason Schreier tweeted out that video games are too long, and people came out on both sides of this argument ready to fight. But now that this particular Pandora's box has been opened again, we at Inside Gaming think it's about time to find an answer. Are video games actually too long, or is there something else going on? To settle this debate, I have the lovely Evan with me today, and Evan will be championing games are too long, while I will be arguing on the side of they're not too long at all. So, Evan, I'm going to ask you a quick question. Why,
Sure.
very briefly, tell me what makes you think that games are too long. Give me like 3 sentences.
Well, before we get into it, let me just throw down a little bit of a disclaimer here. Before everyone gets all up in arms and cancels me, I think people should be able to play whatever kind of games they want. Long or short, doesn't really matter. But in the sake of having a fun conversation about video games, I want to frame my argument around loosening our grip a little bit about what we consider capital G good video games. And that usually comes with a set of like features or checkboxes, top of the line graphics and 30 to 60 hours of gameplay. The idea I want to kind of champion here is like, it's probably okay to spend $60 on an 8-hour game if it's great. And further, if we allow game developers to kind of back off that ledge of trying to pad out games to achieve this imaginary number that determines that it makes a game good, if whether that's 30 hours or 60 hours or 100 hours, then they can focus on actually making the experiences a lot better. I think it's good for games to be a little bit shorter is because there's now a wider range of people who are playing games. When I was younger, I had a ton of time. Now that I'm older, I've got kids. Luckily, my job lets me play games sometimes, but, not everybody's so fortunate. So sometimes I feel like I'm missing out a little bit, I guess.
Okay, so those are all really good points. But on the flip side of that, and this is the basis of my argument that games aren't too long, is that not everybody has that disposable income to invest a ton of money into a game. And that $60 purchase for a big AAA big budget game may be the only purchase that they are able to make for months at a time. And yes, while there are definitely free options out there, taking a look at the fact that everybody wants that, big new title, if you're spending only 6 to 8 hours on a game, that's not really a whole heck of a lot of time to spend on a game that you just dropped $60 on, and now you don't really have much else to do with it. So it ends up being a little bit disappointing in the long run. So I think those are the 2 big bases for our arguments. Let's start off with the fact that AAA games cost $60, okay? And potentially more in the future. We did have a news read on that.
We'll see, right?
So check that one out. But
yeah.
If a game is AAA, it is $60 or potentially more, it should at least have a decent length that makes it worth the price. Recently Capcom got completely raked over the coals for Resident Evil 3's remake being absurdly short. And while it was technically accurate to a degree to the original product, $60 was a lot of money. And even I was saying this, it's like, while I did very much enjoy the game, this is really kind of a bummer to spend $60 on something and beat it in like about 5 to 6 hours. Yeah, I'm not particularly keen on spending that much money on something that, give me that much time of gameplay. Again, I really did love the game. It was really fun. Resident Evil is easily one of my favorite franchises of all time, but 5 to 6 hours for $60 just kind of makes me feel like, shouldn't this have been an additive thing for Resident Evil 2 and maybe make it like that standalone, DLC like, Miles Morales or, the one that we got from Uncharted or, literally everything that's been going forward. It's just like, this feels like that bite-sized bit of content that could have been additive, but even so, it felt a little bit like a ripoff for spending that much money on a game developed by, Capcom of all people. Come on.
Well, I get the feeling of being ripped off, and I totally get the feeling of like needing to feel like a game that you purchased at $60 definitely needs to deliver that value. And in the case of Resident Evil 3, I think it is an absurdly short game. I think there's an argument to be made there about its length, but combined with its quality, I think what it offered people and at that length, I think it just wasn't there, right? The value proposition isn't there. But the thing I like about the new Resident Evil remakes is they are encouraging people to replay games again, right? Like, we think about a game's length in terms of just like how long it takes to beat the first time. And obviously there's statistics out there that say a lot of people don't even do that for these longer games that are more than 8 to 10 hours, right? It's something like 20% of people actually finish games. But what I like about the Resident Evil remakes is that they encourage people to try and play again. I mean, in reality, Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3 Remake are games you can beat in under 3 hours, in 2 hours. There's achievements for it, right? Like those are really, really short, bite-sized game experiences if you kind of have been there before, you've played through it before, and you know what you're doing. And I think that's really, really a cool idea. What if games are shorter and then we encourage people through like things like New Game Plus to really get the most out of those games or experience them in a different way? I think there's really cool potential there, but just imagine what you can do with like a little more polish and a little more time. So let me put the question to you, Caden, because I think everybody values their time and money like a little bit different. It's going to be different across the spectrum, right? I want to ask you, like, how much would you pay for PT, right? Knowing what it is, knowing what's in there, I think $60 is maybe a little high, but like $40?
To preface this, I have 2 PS4s that I copied my original PS4 onto my PS4 Pro so that I could have PT for certain on both of them. So I do very much enjoy it. But that is a tech demo. It is a
Totally.
tech demo, 100%. Is it worth $60? No, I don't think so.
Okay, but
is PT worth $60? No, I probably would have paid $15 to $20 and been totally satisfied on it.
I know that the value isn't there for 60, but there are people out there who would pay that because the value to time and the value to like the product, the quality of it, is different for them, right? There's definitely people out there who would pay 60. I don't think it's personally worth that, but I just wanted to demonstrate that like value to time is different for everybody, right?
I suppose that's technically true, but again, like you pointed out, time and money are correlative. You spend time to make money. You spend money on a product, and oftentimes that product can be a letdown. Even if you really enjoyed the game, if it isn't memorable or replayable, it will feel difficult to actually justify that price tag. And sometimes replayability doesn't necessarily mean, okay, let me play the game again on a harder difficulty or get every achievement. Some people don't like that. I mean, you take a look at the percentages of people who get platinum trophies on things, and it's very minuscule in comparison, which means that people don't necessarily like completing games on average. They like experiencing a game. And even if you replay or put hundreds of hours into a game, it doesn't mean that you're going for a completion. It just means you're spending time with it because you enjoy it. And there's plenty of games that actually do that. And it leads into another big point, which is side quests and game loops. They're valuable. They expand the world or its story and give players content that draw them in to return to the game. A good gameplay loop is fantastic. You brought up Capcom as a bad example. I'll bring them up as a good example. Monster Hunter is an amazing example of this. While the main campaign is super fun, the additional hunts and gameplay loop and getting items, crafting better weapons is addictingly fun, and it's harmless because there's no loot boxes there.
But in terms of like games that don't respect players' times, I think the easy culprits are like open world style games that have seemingly endless side quests. You remember like when they added those systems to Skyrim and Fallout, and the random stranger comes up to you and asks you for help with something, and then it's like really cool and immersive at first, and then you're like, oh wait, these are just gonna keep on coming. These aren't gonna stop. And then it becomes more of like an annoyance or like a chore that you have to do. Maybe even worse is like some Ubisoft games where there's like 5 types of side quests, right? And those are just cloned throughout like a 30 or 40 hour, 60 hour game. And that stuff just feels really grindy. It feels bad. And I think developers are getting better at playing with these overall, but the whole premise for these kind of reusing these mechanics in these game sets is so that they can pad out the game so that they don't get review bombed, right? Like it's not like more memorable quality in that way. Like I said, it's more like a digital chore or just like some kind of job that you have to go into to like finish before you can actually like play the main part of the game. It's just like, it's not value, it's padding, I think, in that case. But even in like Final Fantasy VII Remake, which I thought had like fine side quests and not that many, it was like padded out to hell in some other weird ways, right?
So, I mean, then there's the conversation of DLC, which I don't think that we should be covering here because DLC is something else entirely. But additive content in the case of, hey, we're going to give you new updates and stuff, I think are total fair game in this particular avenue, such as the case of, I don't know, everybody's new favorite time waster, Animal Crossing. You talk about not particularly respecting people's time. It's literally a clock that runs the same as our own time. So time is 1-to-1 for a change in that game. And people can spend hours and hours and hours in that game and never run out of anything to do. So talking about getting bang for your buck, I don't think that Animal Crossing is too short or too long. It's perfect because you make it what it is, but also there is no real end goal. You get KK Slider to join the town and the credits roll. Sure. Is that an ending? Absolutely not. The game keeps going. So, I mean, you talk about, again, it's fantastic. I'll be playing this game. I'll be playing Animal Crossing for years. It is an amazing investment for $60 versus something like, again, I'll bring up Resident Evil. It's like, I as much as I loved Resident Evil 3 Remake, it was a fantastic game. I definitely recommend it for fans of the series, but for, the average gamer, that is not the bang for the buck that, people really want or honestly deserve for a $60 price point. So then let's talk about those main campaigns. Pushing everything else aside, what's so great about having such a short campaign? I mean, is it a pacing issue? Is it, wrapping up storylines in a concise manner? What is it that makes it okay for you to spend, between 5 and 10 hours on a game and be just like, nope, that's totally worth my $60?
I do think a lot of it is pacing. I think about Last of Us 2, recently is a game that could have very well benefited from being 15 hours shorter. I think the story delivery the pacing is like a little bit confusing even, and they could have just told that same story in a smaller chunk of time, even with less of some of what they had in there, and it would have been better for it. I know Last of Us 2 obviously has other issues going on and things that people are upset with, but maybe even if it was shorter, people would have given it another shot, right? They would have given it a better shot because the investment to go into that game is not the 30-hour gameplay time, right? It's 10 hours, and you can get in, you can get out and have that experience. And also, I think it kind of just goes back to the range of people playing games now in terms of the time that they have. Think about a 100-hour game. If someone only has 2 to 3 hours, that they have kids and like a regular job that's not a gaming job.
Playing the dad card, are we?
Maybe they only have 2 to 3 hours every night of like free time, not just gaming time, but like free time. That means like figuring out your adult shit, like maybe cleaning a mess that you didn't get to during the day. That time just evaporates, right? It's gone. And a 100-hour game could take you 50 days to finish. And that's a long time to be playing the same game every day, back to back. And it makes those grindy areas of a longer game, those areas where the loop isn't as strong, it makes those areas feel even longer. I would love to play like both Ni no Kuni games. I would love to play Persona 5, but I just know I'm not gonna finish it.
You brought up Persona 5. You fell right into my trap. Yeah. Okay. Just because a game is long does not mean it's inherently going to have a pacing issue, though. Short games have been known to be just as disjointed in their narratives. It's not an issue of length, but an issue of writing and maintaining that consistent narrative. So it's a writing issue, not necessarily a pacing issue in the length of the game. If you could tell a story in a couple, it's like in a couple hours, great. But if you have more to tell and there's more to explore, then that's also good. You just need to do it in the right way. So again, let's bring up Persona 5. It's widely regarded as one of the best put together RPGs in recent memory. That goes for gameplay and it goes for story. The main campaign, without much side questing, can easily take up 100 hours to complete. It's a solid narrative that keeps you engaged, and if it's your only game that you can only afford to purchase every couple months, time spent playing it easily outweighs the cost of entry. And you do bring up the dad card, but I have my own version of this. Our good friend and writer of a lot of our stuff on Inside Gaming, Brian, is a JRPG aficionado, much like myself. And he has kids too. And yet, see, he doesn't have any sort of problems doing, hundreds of hours in Dragon Quest Builders.
I don't know how he does
Dragon
it.
Quest 11.
It's magical.
Or Persona, or all of those games. He definitely does it. So maybe it's not necessarily a time management issue of the game, but a time management issue of person to person.
Oh. I think Brian is a really interesting case. I definitely have to set time aside now to tackle 1 or 2 of those games a year, but I can't do all of them, right? Like I have to pick them out like very carefully and kind of know what games are coming out and do it that way. But yeah, Brian is incredible. I can't believe you used them against me like this. I am hurt.
So let's get to our final points here. I think that video games that are too short can easily, again, make a player regret that hefty price tag and make them feel ripped off. I'll bring it back up. Resident Evil is definitely one of those things. The 3 most recent games, Resident Evil 2 Remake, Resident Evil 7, and Resident Evil 3 Remake, again, 2 remakes, but 1 brand new entry. You know, you take the collective time, that how long to beat time, it's less than 24 hours. And if you bought every one of those games at launch, that's $180 for 24 hours of gameplay split between 3 games. That averages out to about 7 hours a game. That's not a lot of time for $180. As much as you could rely on, the completion runs and so on and so forth and getting all the achievements, most people, again, they don't do that. They don't like going onto the hard modes of games. It's tedious. They like playing a game to enjoy it. They don't want it to turn into work, which is a conversation that's being had right now. As everyone's joining in on this gaming while we're in the middle of this pandemic, everybody is realizing that sometimes, those parts of the game can feel like a job where we just want to enjoy the game. And if we can just enjoy the game without having to ramp up the difficulty or, finding ways to make it replayable for our $60, it would be really great. And again, Persona 5 is a prime example of that. You buy it, it's going to last you a significant amount of time. Increasing the difficulty to increase the time played isn't a metric worth considering or measuring. It's not fair because some people don't like it and some people just can't. They just don't have the necessary, it's like they're new to this. They have to learn that skill and it's going to take time for them to do that. And if their first game is 3 hours for $60, they're going to be like, well, fuck video games. I don't want to deal with this again. But, games that are too long aren't a bad thing, even if they often rely on, side quests and gameplay loops. So again, the problem with the big budget games, that cost to develop them, isn't about length. It's about them putting in features that don't need to be there, which, bumps up that cost to develop and then makes people have to crunch. Long games are fine and they're perfectly valuable. Games aren't too long. You're just budgeting your time improperly.
That's really well said. I don't want to get ripped off. That's not what I'm saying. And I definitely don't want to encourage publishers into thinking they can rip people off just by making games shorter, right? I think what I'm trying to say is if we let go of this notion that games have to be longer or 30 hours or whatever, then maybe it allows for different types of gaming experiences to exist. And that's what I would love to see. More gaming experiences for more people out there that have different amounts of time. Long games are amazing. Long games are great. Don't get rid of them, obviously. Keep them. Someday, maybe I'll get to Persona 5. It's great that it's in the world. But also maybe there's a world where there's things like Persona 5 and a Persona 5 Lite or something where it allows people to kind of get a similar experience or engage with that world in a different way. I think that could be pretty cool. Most things are better with some type of restraint or editing. I mean, that's what we do for a living, including this video. It's going to be cut down to make it more palatable. I think that's true of games too. If you have some type of editor or restraint, it forces you to improve something and polish it and iterate on it. And games are just, that's their nature. They're iterative by design, by process, and by experience, right? So I think the games you mentioned, while they have like a really, really good core set of mechanics, and that's what I want to see more games have and focus on. I don't think it matters about the length. Think about a game like Tony Hawk Pro Skater. That's a 5-hour campaign, but you're going to play that game for hundreds of hours probably, hanging out with your friends and the same 5 to 6 levels or whatever, just going through those runs and trying to get better. And I think you can do that with other types of games. I think a game like Bayonetta or action games with heavy combat mechanics and deep mechanics can allow you to jump in that way, and replaying them is fun. And even like Resident Evil Remake 2, I think is a great example. I've played that game like 3 times through. And on the other side of it, I think when we think about these AAA games that need to have these longer experiences, and then I look at a game like Red Dead Redemption 2, where even things like sometimes sluggish animations that you have to repeat 100, 1,000 times in a game, it just feels so bad. And then when you get to the end of the game and you have this really weird side quest that sends you, or a main quest that just sends you completely to the other side of the map, That stuff feels awful. Think about Wind Waker and that last segment with the Triforce. So yeah, I think Red Dead Redemption 2 just kind of slogs at the end. Again, there's been stats and reports of people who don't, like most people who play games, don't get to the end of them. That's a thing that's been reported time and time again. My feeling is that shorter games might help people actually see the credits of games that they buy. They might actually get more value out of it because the pacing and everything will get them to kind of coast over that hump and get to the end of the game that they spent $60 on and apparently are not finishing.
You know what? That's definitely a fair point. So I think we've made our claims very well pointed and well laid out for everyone out there. So are games too long? Are games not long enough? I think the answer is in the development cycle. You know, there are some games that are just so satisfying. I think Portal is a prime example of that, and people continuously bring that one up as a game that is well packaged and short. It explores its features and its gameplay concepts to a perfect degree, and it doesn't outstay its welcome. But it's also really short, and once you get to that point, people want more, which is where user-created levels came in to extend that length of the game. So it really kind of finds that level of balance. But it shouldn't be on the task of the players to make the game longer that they love. It should be a fundamental balance between cost and length. And I don't think we've ever properly found that as an industry yet, and we're still fighting against both of these ideals. Can we have a game that is on budget, on time, and a proper length? We totally can. How we get there depends on how games are developed, and I think it's time to shake things up just a smidge.
Yeah, let us know in the comments, what's the perfect length of a game for you? I would like to know.
And thanks for watching Inside Gaming, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Inside Gaming. If you read the title, you know we're going to be discussing the controversial game by Naughty Dog, The Last of Us Part 2, and of course the hate that surrounded the game pre and post-launch. I'm sure there are probably a few people out there that'll hate this video before giving it a watch, but all I ask is that you at least hear us out, you know, and then form an opinion, and then, I mean, who knows, Evan and I, we have pretty divisive opinions about the